Good afternoon, everyone. We are delighted to have you on board this afternoon for our next webinar, which is going to be fantastic. It's Cultivating Emotional Intelligence in the Midst of Instability, Creating EI Awareness and Action to Demonstrate HR Value. And we are so excited about today's sponsor, the Leadership Development Group. And I want to just give you a few housekeeping notes before we get started. As you heard, you are in listen-only mode. However, today's session is participative. We do want you to type your questions in the question box, and at the end of the presentation, Jenifer will answer those for you. So we encourage you to do that. And I'm happy to announce that you will receive HRCI business credit as well as SHRM credit. We've already been pre-approved. Yay! I know you guys are excited about that as we are. So you do need to stay on the entire time to get the credit, however, that we're not being meanies. That's the rules that HRCI and SHRM have set up. So make sure that you don't click off early because you want to get your credits. And following today's broadcast, you will receive a short survey, and we would appreciate your filling out this short survey for our presentation. And we always appreciate your input. So everyone on the broadcast the entire time will also receive a recording of today's presentation that you can share with your team or those who could not attend this afternoon. We do appreciate your joining us. And with that, I'm going to introduce Tracy Duberman. Hello, Tracy.
Hello, Cynthia.
Tracy is president and founder of the Leadership Development Group. With a background combining her operations experience in a variety of sectors across the health industry, 2 decades of coaching and consulting and innovative research on executive leadership effectiveness, Tracy founded the Leadership Development Group in 2008. TLD Group works with leaders to align talent in order to execute strategy and improve performance through educational workshops, tailored on-site leadership development programs, and coaching for leaders and teams. Tracy earned her PhD from New York University, her MPH from the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey, and her BA from the University of Rochester. She serves on the board of the Physicians Coaching Institute, and she is a fellow of the American College of Healthcare Executives and of the Harvard McLean Hospital Institute of Coaching. She belongs to the Healthcare Businesswomen's Association and the American College of Physician Executives. Wow, got to catch my breath here. We also bet you've noticed in HR Professionals magazine that Tracy is a regular contributor. And her next article I know you will love. It's called Advancing Women Leaders. That will be out the first week of April. And now I'm going to turn it over to Tracy to introduce today's speaker.
Thank you, Cynthia, so much. We are delighted about our partnership with HR Professionals magazine and excited to be sponsoring this webinar today. And I am also delighted to welcome all of the attendees to this session. Before I introduce your speaker, Jenifer Hill, I want to take a quick moment to tell you a little bit more about the Leadership Development Group. Jenifer, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. I have the distinct honor and privilege to lead TLD Group, a firm that's committed to developing leaders and their teams to execute strategy. Our vision is really to transform the industry through its greatest assets, its people, through our innovative talent development solutions. And our values do make an impact. We value our partnership with our faculty. Jenifer is amongst many of them. In terms of their innovativeness, mindfulness, passion, agility, curiosity, and the teamwork with which we work with our clients. Next slide, Jenifer. Great. We offer a variety of talent development solutions ranging from executive coaching to team development to succession planning and customized leadership academies. Our global team is comprised of management psychologists, certified executive coaches, academics, and tenured consultants who have expertise coaching and consulting to leaders and teams across diverse businesses. Given who we are and what we do, we trust you'll find this session both thought-provoking and practically applicable to the work that you do and the support you provide to leaders and teams within your own organizations. Next slide. Now on to the headliner. It gives me great joy and pride to introduce you to Jenifer Hill, who is the owner of JH Coaching and Consulting. Jenifer is a multi-credentialed healthcare executive coach, professional clinical counselor, meditation and mindfulness teacher, senior consultant, speaker, and facilitator. We are fortunate to have Jenifer a member of TLD Group's faculty, as she brings with her extensive knowledge of human behavior with a grounding in a person-centered philosophy. You are in for a treat this afternoon as Jenifer teaches us how to cultivate emotional intelligence in the midst of instability. So without further ado, Jenifer, take it away.
Thank you, ladies. What a warm welcome. I am thrilled to be here. When Tracy asked me to speak, it was pretty quick to mind when we were discussing what we would actually want to be sharing with all of you. EI, as we know, has been around for a while, and as we were reflecting back and thinking about what this session could be about, we really wanted to highlight the strength and the opportunity that HR can bring to the table and the opportunities for growth and development in the midst of all this instability. And so we're going to do that in a series of ways. So looking at our objectives, just as a high level of what you can expect, we know that HR has always brought value, but now with COVID and the many other things that have happened in the last almost year to date, that value actually may be larger than what it has ever been in decades. We're going to talk about the various elements of emotional intelligence as a refresh, or maybe some new information for some of you. And third, I really want you to be able to walk away with tactics to not only self-regulate, but also to enable others to regulate during this moment of instability, or moments rather. So take a breath. Some of these pictures may look like I stole them off of your photos. This was my then 3-year-old son who was sitting in front of my laptop when I broke every rule and said, your screen time is now preschool time. Yes, we were shifting. All of a sudden, everyone knew who their governor was, whether you were political or not. They were on your TV or Facebook or streaming some live scenario for you every day. During this time, both of my boys actually got very, very ill. Pretty sure both of them actually had COVID. And this was the first time that I was only allowed to go in with one of them at a time. And it was evident that things were changing. Meanwhile, everything started closing, right? Carry out was no longer a commodity. It was the only option. Businesses, small businesses, large businesses were closed until further notice. This was a pretty common thing that we would see. The inside of these large buildings were empty. We were told to stay home. All of a sudden, there I was. It was literally me and my 2 boys. In a matter of days, things that were and are a large part of who we are personally, professionally, and socially were thrown into the state of fear and panic. And we weren't really sure what was going to happen. Then you throw on even more elements of change, political upheaval, and what research is showing, this is actually the highest frustration, to put it lightly, that we have seen within the workplace related to politics ever recorded. Then gender and racial inequality became more and more evident and was brought to the surface like never before. Meanwhile, rates of mental health and mental illness just became staggering in the approach. All while 71% of individuals at this point that Pew Research was taking, 71% were currently working from home. Numbers that we never would have guessed would be the reality. All while work and life became integrated, and not in the way that we call work-life balance. Instead, it was no longer a laughable moment when the dog jumped up behind you in your Zoom meeting. It was just frustrating. That's just what it was. It really seemed as if overnight, the system of work had changed. And perhaps you were one of those people who are maybe wanting some change in the workplace or wanting some change in your life, but we didn't necessarily want it this way, if we're all honest. In our bodies, our minds, Our day-to-day interactions were changed. And I don't think any of us wanted to sign up for that. Meanwhile, we were left with what many of us played a game back in middle school and late elementary school, where we were wondering what we were going to land on. HR professionals and the HR leaders that I had the opportunity to connect with during this time said to me that they really felt like it was just the moving of the hand. What were they going to land on today? What was going to change? What did they have to address? For HR, things just seemed to keep on coming. That instability remained and still does to a very large extent. And that, VUCA of volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguity, that gave a whole new meaning to what we were experiencing. Change came quickly, and there was not a playbook for any of this. All of a sudden, the hierarchy of needs was actually on the weight of human resources. So although HR was once viewed by many as a way to protect the company and its people, all of a sudden, this really became the tipping point for each individual needs. All of a sudden, HR was responsible for things that, to a certain extent, we were aware of, but now it was very real and very evident. Things like, am I going to be safe at work? Right? Certain scenarios, that has always been the norm, but at this point, everybody was wondering, how is HR going to keep me safe? Work connections, they were the constant connection for many for quite a long time, and even some cases still are. Our confidence is measured on what we do, and that self-esteem, the self-actualization, all of these items related to what we know to be Maslow's hierarchy of needs, all of a sudden became shifted to a focus on how is human resources going to help me in these areas. And these areas of basic needs were a make or break for many of you. How you responded sent a message to your employees. You were focused or you were not. I remember when my husband, who by the way has still been at work every single day, not one day was he home, he was explaining to me how his HR team was responding or not responding, and how much that was impacting him and how that impacted our home, but also how he had to communicate as a leader and how much of a struggle that was. Meanwhile, I was hearing about HR organizations that were doing phenomenal things, giving opportunities, really being open and honest and transparent, really addressing these psychological safety, loving, belonging, self-esteem, and even aspects of self-actualization in many ways that they could. But in the midst of all of this, we were left with this huge cultural change, internally, organizationally, and really across the entire world, as we saw lockdowns and just a change in everything that we were doing. All of this in a matter of months. It's only normal that we would face some sense of loss or, in this place, or in this situation, change, but there is an emotional response to change that I'm not sure many of us have really identified what that is for us, but even recognize what it is that we have all been through over the last year. So I brought out Kubler's change model because I feel like it describes the change that many people go through as we're adjusting to change or loss. And we'll look at these in more depth in the moments to come. But 1 year ago, when I was looking out the window with my two boys, I'll be honest, that shock and denial was definitely there. The frustration kicked in after I realized that my friend with her really angry or really unbehaved dog was going to be there for longer 2 weeks. That came in as well. But in all seriousness, there were quite a few times where I could say I had moments of feeling depressed. Not necessarily clinical, because I am a mental health clinician. I know what that looks like, but symptoms of depression. And as those weeks turned to months and the reflection really began, it probably began for you just as much as it began for me. It began for our employees, for the people we lead. It probably began in your organization as well. And what was next was not where we are going to handle all of this. Or I'm sorry, what was next? How are we going to handle all of this? What were we going to do? But when I thought about this, I really thought about the conversations that I've had with HR leaders in the last year. They shared that they felt as if their actions, their decisions were something like this ripple effect. They felt like every single decision they made, every single thing they put to the side, every single statement that was made created a ripple effect in the pond, if you will, of the organization, and that it was impacting their most valuable asset, their people. And this is something that HR knows. All of you, this would not be a surprise, but all of a sudden, it mattered like never before. Now there's this expectation from HR that it's not just about the people, it's a deeper connection of the people and what they need in order for the organization to move, to be sustainable, or simply exist. Every move had a ripple effect on so many things. Just because it's 1 year doesn't mean that those initial weeks of fear or shock or frustration have left. The reality is that the ripple is still going because things are still changing and we're still in the midst of uncertainty. So Daniel Goleman said this quote years ago, that the rules of work are changing. We're being judged on a new yardstick, and it's not just how smart you are, but how you handle yourselves and each other. Yes, Mr. Goleman, you are correct. HR leaders are the ones that can drive change process by demonstrating and living the expectations of their employees. This is the time, ladies and gentlemen, this is the time that we can say the rules of work are changing. We know we are being judged on a new yardstick, but instead of us staying stuck, frustrated, uncertain, moments of denial and fear, maybe this is the exact time that we've all been waiting for. The main reason why you probably got into HR was to enhance the human element back into the workplace. What if all of this was for a reason? So I get it. Probably trying to stay afloat. But here's the thing. We know that employees are expecting more from their employers. So some things are new here, and some things are just enhanced. We know that HR systems, and again, the information at the bottom, this will be shared with you for resources, but so you know where all this came from. Looking at HR systems, communication and transparency is expected at this point. And it's not just the nice newsletter that comes out once a quarter. Transparent, active communication is expected. The office, there's no more just a little bit of flex time here or there. It has to be personalized expectations and personalized flexibility. We're essentially reimagining what organizations look like. This idea of being a good corporate citizenry and having this embedded in EDI issues, this is the norm. This is the expectation. And at this point, it's all about talent, and in a way that we've never experienced before. So we know that there has been a war on talent for quite a few years, but now we know that employees are expecting us to invest in them with transferable skills. They want to be agile and flexible, and more. All of these things are equally as important, but the one that I want to focus on today is this aspect of well-being in work life. So what does that mean when we say a deeper, more caring connection and mental health priority? But before we do this, I would like to throw up a polling question. So your engagement is appreciated. And so the question, and I believe Amy's going to help me up, it should pop up here soon, is I want you to consider your organization. So do you have a strategic plan to address wellness and work life? Your options are no, I do not. B, kind of like this owl here, or C, this is something I would consider to be a strength within my organization. We'll leave this open just for a few seconds here.
Okay, so Jenifer.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We have a majority of people who have voted, and 58% have said kind of, where 30% have said no, and only 12% said this is something I would consider a strength.
Great. Okay, not great about the numbers, but great. Thank you for sharing. So this is exactly, pretty similar to what you just said to me. When we looked at the results of 494 organizations polled early this year, we asked them, we being Willis Towers Watson, asked, how effective were you in supporting your employees during the pandemic? 29% felt as if they were effective, right? So the 12 of you who said, yeah, we've got this, and the maybe 50, that has probably changed as the year has gone on. But on average, what we see nationally, 29% of organizations said that this was how they were able to support, or they were they were supporting at 29%. And so the pandemic in particular, what we found from this result is that emotional and social well-being of their employees, this was the #1 issue that was of concern. And even more specifically, as you see here on the right of the slide, stress and burnout were the #1 areas of concern. And 54% of these 494 organizations reported well-being as their largest challenge. And the two reasons cited for stress and burnout: caregiver needs and lack of social support. So what does this mean for us? Well, the first time I read this, as well as many other articles, I thought about, if the last year wasn't enough for us to get a wake-up call, perhaps this is. Perhaps the recognition that the 30% of you say no, the 12% of yes, we do have something, and the 58% of maybe, that should be a wake-up call, ladies and gentlemen. This is the time, my friend. What's your plan? What are you going to do? Because we're pretty deep into this and things are just continuing to change and adjust. How are we going to support our employees? I understand that each one of those employee expectations that we saw in the slides ago require focused attention, specifically well-being and work life for our time together. But how you can begin to cultivate, deepen those really caring connections and shift to make mental health that priority, how do we do that? For me, the first thing came to mind, our good friend, EI. So if you want to just take a moment, I have a different quote here of what EI means. Take a moment and close your eyes and just think about the words that stick out to you as I read. So emotional intelligence, a set of emotional and social skills that influence the way we perceive and express ourselves, develop and maintain social relationships, cope with challenges, and use emotional information in an effective and meaningful way. You can open your eyes. So when we have an active chat, I ask people, what words stick out to you? Oftentimes people will say, a skill that can be learned, yes. How we maintain social relationships, yes, it's an active process. How we cope with challenges, hello, 2020/21. How we use emotional information, hello, stress and well-being that our employees are facing as well as ourselves. And how we can be effective in a meaningful way. Ding, ding, ding. This is exactly what our employees are saying we need. And quite frankly, this is exactly what we need to make it through all of this. So this change in emotional and social well-being, it begins with emotional intelligence. No longer is EI like the nice to have course that your leaders or your managers can pick from. I would say it's 100% required at this point. So reminder, a little bit deeper into EI, not just the definition. There are two sides of emotional intelligence. There's the interpersonal intelligence, that personal competence, which we're going to talk about in depth. of self-awareness and self-management. And then the intrapersonal, the social competence, the social awareness, empathy, relationship management, exactly what our employees are saying that they need. Both of these things really elevate us. They bring us up to our highest level of being, if you will, during the times of change. These are the things that create stability. They allow us to lead from a place of curiosity versus fear. When we know what is taking place inside of us, when we're able to regulate ourselves and then engage with others, it creates a whole different atmosphere, and it shifts the brain away from the hijacked amygdala back into the present, problem-solving, focused meaning and process to move forward the brain. Otherwise, if we don't focus on these areas, we're easily hijacked. And as a reminder, when it comes to empathy, Daniel Goleman says that empathy is the easiest way to recognize, but also to demonstrate emotional intelligence. We increase that empathy. It's simply being present with someone. Now, I say it simply because to be present, we have to be internally grounded. And that is not so simple, especially now. So the 4 areas, digging a little bit deeper, self-awareness, this is really tuning into your emotions and how they impact your performance. I don't know how many times I have used the word emotional literacy in my career as a mental health clinician, all the way into coaching and consulting. Emotional literacy is one thing that we just were not taught. Now, my oldest son, who is 4.5, he's gonna be a rock star at emotional literacy. But most of us who are older than 5, that's not so much the case. Likewise, self-management, regulating those emotions. My 4-year-old might not be as good as regulating emotions as we all are, but the time will come. Social awareness, tuning into others' emotions, having empathy, right? So the awareness piece on the side, as well as the social management, effectiveness in our interactions and influencing others. We need all 4 of these things to shift our culture, to shift our mindset, to move us into what could be the next thing for HR, the change we've actually been wanting. COVID may have been the thing to break this open for us to actually instill this, because our employees expect well-being in work life. They want those deeper, more caring, connected, and they want mental health to be a priority. They expect this like never before. So remember when we thought that work life, that there could be a balance or that there's a way to disconnect? Yeah, we all know that's a long time ago. That's not there, but it doesn't have to be a negative thing. Again, this could be the very thing that our culture has needed, a way to empower people with the skills and the passions that they have, a way to truly create teams and not just have to constantly foster and reconnect, but instead to have true, deeper relationships and connections at work. But it starts with you. Whether you are brand new to HR or you're a CHRO, I don't know. I don't know what your title is, but I will say that your name here means that it starts with you. So we're going to go back to this change curve again. And I just want to take a moment and kind of break these through, because as I'm going through, I want you to really take a good inventory and say, where are you at right now? Not where were you, but just right now. And there's no judgment with this. There's no prescription that's going to come along with this. It's just simply an opportunity to recognize, we have been through and are still going through a lot, but where are you at right now? Because you are a huge piece of this puzzle for us to tap into something that perhaps we've never, ever even imagined we would experience before. So just like we were talking about self-awareness in a few slides ago, and you all know, you're in HR, you know that self-awareness is the #1 key to leadership development. The same mantras are true in this change curve. So thinking about where are you at, taking a moment to reflect. So the first stage is usually where change is introduced, right? This is where that initial response of shock or denial, as you see here on the slide, come into play. And this is really when we're reacting to the status quo, right? This idea that, what do you mean I have to put my kid on virtual preschool? I don't even allow more than 30 minutes of TV time. as a very simple example. Moving on to stage 2. Once the reality of the change hits, people tend to react negatively. They move to change 2. They fear the impact. They often are angry, which, by the way, anger is never primary. That they actively resist or protest against the change. You know, we have the people that were just flat out not following what we were being asked to do. And some people weren't even leaving their homes at all. There's a disruption that comes in this stage, and if it's not clearly or carefully managed internally as well as externally within an organization, this can quickly spiral into chaos. This moment and this level is really stressful, and it's really an unpleasant stage. Then really the stage 3 is when people start focusing on what they've lost. There's this aspect of grief that comes here. They start to let go and accept some of the changes, and they begin testing and exploring what the changes mean. So they learn the reality of what's good and maybe not so good, and how they must adapt. And by stage 4, they're not only accepting these changes, but you can also start to embrace them. You can rebuild the ways of working or doing, and only when people get to this stage can the organization really start to reap the benefits, and only can you start as an individual to start to reap the benefits. So we change because those around us and ourselves change within the organization. So only when we have made our own personal transition can we support organizational change and truly reap the benefits of overall change in the midst of instability. So again, I want to know, where are you on this change curve? So there are 4 options here: frustration, depression, and by no means am I trying to diagnose, experiment, decision, or integration.
We'll give people a few more seconds to answer, and I'll share the results. Okay, interesting. Well, 30% say experiment, followed by 28% say decision, 24% integration, 13% frustration, and only 5% depression.
Okay. So we're moving upward. That's good. Good to hear. But also knowing, even though we're a year in, we're still experimenting. Knowing, of course, there are a lot of things that are taking place even to this current moment. I'm glad to know that we're in this spot, because perhaps the next thing that I'm going to talk to you about may be something to experiment with. So I am not an HR expert. I don't have any credentials beside my name related to HR, but I am a mental health clinician. I am a leadership development consultant and an executive coach, and I've coached over 2,000 clients and have had thousands more clinical clients. And I do know quite a few things when it comes to what people need to feel stable. And one of those things is that when things are tough, when things are new, or when they're uncertain, they want leadership to guide the way. It's just the way that we're created, right? More of us want to know how do we versus the ones that say, how can I, right? So when we like stability, right? We want to know what to expect. We want leadership to set that tone and clear the path. And as I said earlier, I truly believe that HR, each one of you, have the opportunity to create that path. And so if employees want and need wellness, let's shift to wellness. Let's consider perhaps a brand new model. And this truly is that. This is brand new. This model of wellness-centered leadership, although the foundational focus on leadership is specifically with physicians, I chose this model because this model is is not just for academic medicine or physician leadership, but this model was created for a subset of individuals who have the largest burnout rate that we know of for a profession, as well as the #1 rate of suicide. Physicians, that's right. Physicians have the #1 rate, as an estimation of daily, at least one physician we know of pre-COVID was choosing suicide. And they have the largest burnout rate. The most recent rate that I saw from just last year is upwards of 74% of all physicians say that they are burnt out. So if this model can work for them, I think it can be impactful for us. So let's talk about what these things actually mean. So as you see here on the left-hand side, this is wellness-centered leadership at the core. But there are things that really are incorporated into this. And again, you will have a link to this exact information. And I actually spoke with all of the authors, and they said they'd be more than happy to talk to each and every one of you with any questions or concerns that they can address related to this new way of doing. So with wellness-centered leadership, there's this aspect of mindset, behavior, and outcome. They're all interwoven together in WCL. So there's 3 elements. The first one we're going to talk about is care always, and the other 2 are cultivate relationships and inspire change. So when I talk about care always, sure, sounds cute, whatever, but the reality is that caring always is more than just caring for other people. It's cultivating well-being, professional fulfillment, vitality, and this has to start with the leader first. First time I read this, I was thrilled because most people are not talking about this. So caring always, care self, first care for self, critical. Now, as you see, all of the numbers here are 100%, on purpose. When we're talking about caring for self, it's health, emotional and physical, not I have mental health symptoms. No, how are we growing your mental health, right? Just a couple of days ago, huge announcement. Now all of a sudden we have a prince that's working for BetterUp. Wow, okay, all of a sudden we are truly focusing on mental health. Interesting, exciting, but interesting. Focusing on this aspect of holistic health being critical. So with nutrition, what you consume, food, content, yes, social media, content, what are you consuming? That impacts your nutrition. Exercise, body and mind, as well as rest. No more bragging awards for overworking. So bringing in emotional intelligence of self-awareness and self-management. Consider, what does this actually look like when we break down these 4 areas? When we look at health of emotional and physical, there are some things that you can do. Connecting, reflecting, what I talked about earlier, this aspect of emotional literacy. Do you actually know what it is that you are feeling? What is it? It's not just a mad, sad, or glad. It's more than that. And there's actually an app that I'll have at the very end that I don't get any kickbacks for, and it's a free app. It's called the Mood Meter that you can download and say, this is how I feel. And it gives you the words that go along with what it is that you're experiencing and helps you journal out by typing, and also gives you some suggestions of how to shift those emotions. Also living through your values. There's also a link at the very end of this exercise or this webinar that you can go through and ensure that you truly are living through your values, and that will impact your emotional health. Again, consuming, really trying to minimize the exposure to external stimuli, identifying what you can control and how much of it. And there's been a really fun movement of I Choose Beauty. It was a 30-day challenge to be able to put images in front of you to shift your mindset and to give you a different form of nutrition. Exercise, so it's not just being mindful in your movement or having simple movements like yoga or even walking, but it's really thinking about the exercise of your mind. So using statements like, what if I try, versus I have to do the following, or adding on yet another thing to your task list. And when it comes to rest, being very intentional to schedule an AM and a PM. I was just in a clubhouse room the other day, and there's a neuroscientist, and she was talking about the critical need to step outside in the morning, even if it's still cold where you live, to step outside in the AM so your brain says it's morning. and to step outside after you worked all day inside of your house to say, it's evening, to give that stark contrast and awareness, and trying to have as much in your routine as possible, to disconnect, you know this, and sleeping at least 6 hours a night. So the other two elements are cultivating relationships, so embracing that and unleashing that talent, and inspiring change by encouraging others. So looking at talent, knowing the individual, right? This is critical when we're thinking about social awareness. We have to know who the people are that you're working with. And it's more than just, what do they fill out on their performance review, or what's their next goal. We truly have to understand what people need, the good, the bad, and the ugly that they're facing. How can we be of support on those two items that we saw earlier of caring for their family, but also having social disconnection? How can we help with those things if we don't know what our people need? When we look at alignment, how are you cultivating relational health? I put on here connection critical. Sometimes we have looked at in the past that connection is just an optional thing. At this point, connection is critical. Whatever you are doing, do more. We have to provide more hope and instill that relational health in order to build alignment and social awareness. Empowering. So no more is up, down. This is like matrix on steroids now, right? This matrix approach. Everybody's input matters to a large extent. The communication needs to be inspirational, and it has to be transparent. And the last one that I added on here is validation of affect. So this is actually new research that came out just from Ohio State just a few weeks ago. And it was a study of 307 undergraduate students that they participated in an experiment. The students completed questionnaires measuring positive and negative affect at the beginning and end of a study, and their overall mood at several times during the experiment. And what they found is when their mood was validated with something as simple as, I hear what you're saying. So we think about this from a employee standpoint, so-and-so in HR, this is what I'm experiencing. And you just simply validate their emotion instead of what can I do? How can we help? And moving towards the processing or the problem solving. What we have seen is that if you simply validate and let it stay there, it buffers that positive affect. Now, if we shift to the what can I do? How about this? And start problem solving, they don't feel as heard. And what happens is that affect shifts to the negative. So if we stay curious in our interpersonal reactions, AKA be present, AKA be empathetic, we will see that we will validate that affect, and we will see that we will be able to have that social awareness and social management moving forward. So I know we have covered a lot, and we are getting close to time, so this is perfect. Reflection for you. I just want you to take 30 seconds and think about what is one action step that you can take today to build your EI, because it does start with you. And if you even want to take a step further, think about wellness-centered leadership. What does this look like for you? What does it look like potentially for your team and maybe even for your organization? So I'm going to give you just about 30 seconds. And then we'll move on to start to close up. So I know that there's a lot that has taken place. I know it. I stood outside of my window with my boys wondering what the heck I was going to say to them and how this was going to change everything. We had no idea what we were walking into. But here's the thing is that you, me, we we can cultivate emotional intelligence even when things are changing. It doesn't matter where we're at on this curve, because it changes from one day to the next. Just as long as we're being present and we're focusing on what we need, and we're starting to look for what I believe is maybe the biggest takeaway of all of this, is to find meaning in what makes you, in all of this. What is the meaning? For me, I found meaning in so many of the challenges and frustrations that I've experienced, not just this year, but in general. But your loss, my loss, the grief that we have all been through. Kessler, David Kessler, he is a psychologist. He referred to the 6th stage of grief is to find meaning. So what is it for you? For me, these 2 little guys right here that are laughing at each other. And I'll ask you, if you're not sure what it is yet, hey, take them on as your meaning right now. Kids need us. They need us to figure this out because they deserve it. They deserve to work and live in an environment that looks at them as a whole person and attempts to take care and support and provide what it is that they need, so that no matter if another pandemic comes or not, they recognize that there are people who care and that they need to look at themselves, and we can be the ones to teach them that all these aspects of emotional intelligence matter, not just the bottom line. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I know we're going to open it up to questions, and I just wanted to leave this slide up. It has my contact information as well as our website here for you to reach out with us with any additional questions or concerns that we may not get to. Everything is here. This will be available for you to download. These items here are actually linkable as well directly to the apps, as well as every single thing that we've talked about today.
So Jenifer, we do have a few questions, and it's great because we have a few minutes left to get through some of these questions. And I want to thank you so much for sharing your perspectives on cultivating EI. It's always insightful to listen to you. You have a really interesting perspective in bringing in the mental health framework with emotional intelligence. Nowadays, we really can't separate personal from professional. And I think it's really important that we as HR leaders focus on both, the whole person. I love the whole person-centered approach. So as a reminder to everybody that's on the line, in your dashboard, there is the handout that Jenifer has up on the screen right now that you can download. But let's get to the questions. So the first one is, as an HR professional, who are the people that need to be involved in creating how we bring our employees back to work and what the future of our organizations ultimately look like?
So I know, from the experiences that I've had, I know everybody kind of has their own opinion, right, of who needs to be involved. But if we use even this model and what we know, some long-standing models about the incorporation of people into change, as well as creating psychological safety, I would strongly recommend that you use, like I referred to earlier, this aspect of using this matrix type of organization to your benefit by engaging with all different types of stakeholders. So, understanding and recognizing what people truly want and need, and trying to create that as much as possible. So I've seen a lot of creative organizations, first doing just a survey of what would be the ideal, and really then having small group sessions or having team sessions and supporting the team leaders to ask specific questions about how they want the new work life to look like, what they want the office to look like. Because so many times we just assume people want this or that, but in reality, a lot of people are saying they'd be thrilled to go back to work. They're fine with going back to work. And other organizations, no one wants to go back to the office. So it's very unique for each organization, as we're seeing. The research is showing more and more is that there's not really a standard, but we do know in order to create psychological safety, we have to have those conversations that may not be maybe as efficient or direct in nature, but that goes a long way when you're asking across and you're being transparent and you're giving a variety of options and not being stuck in one or two, but instead being open to creativity. And that allows people to feel as if they're safe to be able to share their thoughts and ideas.
Excellent advice. Another question came in. First of all, intrigued with the wellness-centered leadership. Any advice on engaging senior leaders in conversations around this leadership approach when they may not always be as people-centric in their views or priorities?
Yes. So just full bottom line of burnout, full ROI. At this point, seriously, you get on anyone's LinkedIn right now, that's what they're talking about. Burnout, burnout, burnout. How is it impacting things? Talking about engagement levels, talking about turnover, talking about loss in terms of productivity. It's huge. So if we are, and there's also a decent amount of research that's showing organizations who have shifted towards more of this wellness approach, how they have seen productivity increase. So I get it. I have to stand in front of those CFOs pretty often to be able to say, now here's the bottom line. And there's a lot of data out there, and it's actually right at your fingertips right now to be able to say, what does that look like? And also that anecdotal data is extremely helpful as well. So even, a small subset, even as potentially you're going through the question previously of identifying what do people want, getting more information of what that would look like, maybe even running trials or, running small group batches to see what that looks like to be able to create a sample size for yourself.
Excellent. How do you identify where an employee might be on the Kubler-Ross chart you talked about? Do you suggest having support groups as we enter this new norm?
So, excuse me. So how do you identify where they are? Well, I wouldn't necessarily encourage trying to assess where they are at, because the reality is on Kubler, as any change or a loss, if you've ever lost somebody in your life related to a true physical loss of grief, we know that one day we can be just fine, quote unquote, right? We're okay, we've come to this point of acceptance, and then the next day it's like, oh my gosh, I feel like this just happened again, right? And so you go back into this state of frustration and anger and even denial to a certain extent. And that is truly the case when it comes to what we have all experienced. I mean, this is by far, as a mental health clinician, I am seeing, and the research is just now showing this because of the calming of the storm, if you will, is that this is a form of post-traumatic stress for a lot of people. A lot of us have experienced so much trauma and loss. And so if we're trying to identify what does that look like for somebody, the long and short, it's going to change. So it's difficult, but providing opportunities, yes, please do so. Providing opportunities in a safe, and it doesn't have to be EAP. Like when I'm talking about wellness-centered leadership, ladies and gentlemen, this is more than just providing an EAP. This is a true way of leading an organization. It's this recognition of the whole self, the whole person. And so you can't rely just on external parties. Individuals want to have connection with the people that they're working with. So that may be having groups that's maybe led by a mental health clinician with no diagnostic criteria. But if something does come out, there's somebody there that is equipped and able to deal with some of those things. But again, asking your teams, what do they want? Would they attend, right? Not just assuming that we know the right thing or the right answer, but experiment. Many of you are in that mode. Experiment, try some things. And at this point, we're not really sure because it's all brand new to us.
Do you have any tools that you could recommend for measuring burnout within organizations?
Yeah, so Maslow has a tool that is widely used that measures burnout. There are some risks associated to that, but that's what people tend to go to. So I would just say that for now without knowing what the industry is.
Okay. Here's another one. Please address the ongoing issues of cutbacks and reductions in force, which are the current reality, which puts us all on the survival rung of the hierarchy of needs.
Yeah. Oh, isn't that so true? So no matter where you're at, if you're the one who has to deliver the message or you're the one that is sitting there and receiving the message, EI is still important, right? Where are you at when it comes to your self-awareness? How are you taking care of self? And I'm not talking about bubble baths and massages. I'm truly checking in as some of these things that are listed here of, using the mood meter, identifying, what is in your control, what can you do, taking good notes to take care of yourself, to recognize what it is that you're facing, and just being honest that a lot of this stuff is just ridiculous, right? It's not okay. And that's okay to say that. And I'm not telling you to, go off and do something extreme, but what I am saying is call it for what it is. Don't just keep on stuffing it down, and taking some time, with some of the examples that are on this slide, to calm the body, to relax, to breathe, take a walk, and then identify what is next for you. And if you're one of the people that has to make some of those tough decisions, really leaning into as much as you can to first taking care of yourself and then thinking about how are you caring for others. So first caring for yourself, making sure that a solid, true foundation that you have had and that you're being intentional. But second, then how are you showing empathy? How are you shifting your mindset to ensure that people are getting what they need as much as possible? Hence the fact that EI, I truly believe, is really the one thing that is a constant through all of this change. Does that help answer that?
Yeah, for me it does. Yes, I would ask the asker to put response in the question box to make sure that we did answer the question appropriately. Okay, what tips do you have for recentering yourself in the moment when experiencing frustration?
Good one. So there's so many things, but I'm a firm believer of this aspect of prove it to a jury. Before I even do that, Tracy, I apologize, you've heard me say this before, but I alluded to this briefly, but an emotion or a thought only lasts for 90 seconds. That's not a Jen statement, that is a research statement. 90 seconds, an emotion will last. You have a choice. What am I going to do with this? Am I going to keep it, or am I going to drop it or deal with it, right? Whatever one you want to do. So actually the mood meter is really helpful for this. So if you have it, I actually have it on my phone, the app, you open it up and it identifies for you. You can say what it is that you're experiencing, and really just so you can see it. So it says, hi there, how are you feeling right now? So I feel, and it gives you 4 options of high energy, of unpleasant or pleasant. We'll just pick pleasant for now. And it goes all across the spectrum. So enthusiastic, and it gives some other words, again, building on that emotional literacy, critical. So if you identify, yeah, that's what I'm feeling, cool, actually know what it is that I'm feeling, you have the choice to stay in that emotion. And I always say, taking it to that next step further, when we know what that emotion or that thought is, oftentimes we just keep on rolling with that thought or emotion, even if it is not true or valid in nature. And what I say is, could you prove it to a jury? Sometimes I even laugh and say, to the jury of Jen, right? If you know me, I'm in any way, I'm a very strong personality. I'm a Enneagram 8, so I can challenge a lot of things. And so if you can prove it to me that you should be holding on to that idea or ruminating on that thought, then you know what, more power to you. But I will say most of the time, the cognitions, the thoughts that are coming into our head are not valid. And so if we can take control over those things by saying, this is not true, this is not valid, and this is why. I use our 5 senses as much as possible, and I can go through, if you're interested, feel free to reach out to me and I can give you the actual slide that shows you how to do this. But using our senses to gain that attention in our brain, to shift away from whatever is being hijacked, more than likely your amygdala is being hijacked, to stay in that emotion, we have the power to shift away in a matter of 90 seconds. Completely up to you in terms of making that decision. But things like the mood meter, or using, even the grid diary to recognize where have I been at, and even looking at insight timer, or there's actually a breathing zone, so it's relaxing the nervous system. There's so many things that you can do that are quick and easy and right here on your phone.
Excellent. Jenifer, you have taken us up to the top of the hour and you were able to answer 8 really interesting, impactful questions. So thank you so much. I just wanted to mention that for those of you that stayed through the entire presentation and are looking for SHRM credits, we will be sending you a copy of the presentation video. And there was a question here about just repeating the name of the measurement for burnout tool that you recommended.
Maslach.
Maslach, M-A-S-L-A-C-H.
And I can actually send it to this so that when you receive your survey, it will be on here.
Okay, that's terrific. And that was the one out of Mayo Clinic, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, terrific. Well, Jenifer, thank you so very much. I feel inspired and a bit happier after listening to you. I'm going to turn it over to Cynthia to close out, and I thank everybody for attending. Cynthia? You're on mute. We can't hear you, sorry. Let's see. Okay, well, I'm going to step in for Cynthia, even though she's much better at this than I'll ever be. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, you can certainly reach out to Jenifer or to us at info@tldgroupinc.com. Happy to respond to any of your questions, and we look forward to seeing you again and answering any questions you might have. Oh, Cynthia, are you back?
I think I'm back. Can you hear me?
You are.
Yes. Yeah.
Yay. Well, thank you everyone for attending. This was a fantastic webinar. Jenifer and Tracy, top notch. Thank you so much. Just want to invite everyone to our webinar next week, and it will be on the 31st of March, which will actually be a Wednesday instead of a Thursday. I will be your speaker, and our topic is going to be interpersonal HR competencies. And it has been approved for HRCI business credit as well. So please join us next week and watch for your email. And thank you so much for attending today. And thank you, ladies. Fantastic. That's great.
You.
Thank you for the opportunity. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.